Okay, well, welcome everyone. Welcome to Getting to Yes, Proven Strategies for Community Action. My name is Maggie Stier, the former field service representative for the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance, and now working part-time there on a variety of assignments, including helping with community projects. It's great to have you here at this virtual gathering, our COVID accommodation and part of our ongoing assistance to people like you who are caring for community landmarks, buildings owned by nonprofits, faith-based groups, or municipalities. These programs of the Preservation Alliance are supported by generous sponsors, including Michael Petrovic Architects, Artistic Tile, Novus Engineering, John Jordan Design, Martini Northern, LLC, and JRT Architects. We hope you become a member if you're not already. Membership supports our assistance to community projects like yours and helps us advocate for preservation at the state and local level and expand the preservation toolbox with things like tax incentives and property easements, so you can make a big difference. We're joined today by Kate Marquis of the Save the Chandler House campaign in Manchester, and Judith Kushner from Mascoma Valley Preservation. We're recording the session and we'll be posting it to our website and YouTube channel. Our format is this. We'll ask you to unmute yourselves and introduce yourself with your name, town, and the name of the project you're working on only. Then we'll begin the PowerPoint and the speakers will tell us a little bit about their experience. Then the remainder of the session will be discussion of 10 essential strategies for getting to yes. I'll call on the presenters first for comments, and then you'll get a chance to add your own ideas and strategies. Unmute again, raise your hand if you're on video. I'm going to be the timekeeper and moderator, and I do have to say we're going to keep it moving because there's a lot to cover. So let's get started. Let's do introductions first, if we could. Unmute, please. Ernie Landry.
Good afternoon, and thanks for having this this session. I really appreciate it. Actually, I'm not here looking to learn more about how I can handle a specific project that we've got going on right now, because we have a number of projects we've completed, a number that will be in the future, but I'm looking more for just some general ideas about how to promote the notion of historic preservation and how to encourage folks to get engaged in that, and to just get the general public in the town aware of the need for it, as well as have some strategies on how to do that.
And what's your town, Ernie?
Kingston. I'm the chairman of the Kingston Heritage Commission.
Great, thank you. Kathy Allen.
Hi, everybody. Kathy Allen from New Durham, representing the 1772 Meeting House restoration.
Christina.
Hi there, Christina Astian from Moulton Borough, chair of the Heritage Commission, and we have various projects going on.
Okay, Jameson Tucker.
Hi there.
Hi there. Name, town, project.
This is Jameson Tucker. I'm based out of Northampton, and I don't have a specific project. I'm new to New Hampshire, but I've been a lifelong preservationist from Texas.
Terrific. So you're going to learn the ropes of town meeting and all that?
You're correct. I did live in a small town in Massachusetts and got exposed to that. And it is exactly unlike anything I've ever experienced in my life. And I worked in the Chamber of Commerce business for a long time.
Okay, great. And then we'll introduce our speakers with the next. Is there anyone else I didn't include? Okay, great. I think that's it. Then we'll go to the next slide and introduce Judith Kushner.
Hi, my name is Judith Kushner, and my husband and I live in Canaan. I'm a member, the vice president of the Mascoma Valley Preservation group. We're a nonprofit, a new nonprofit, we have two projects going. One, you can see the band standing in the middle of Route 4 in front of the Grafton Center Meeting House. And that's a shot taken after we started to work on it. Oops. And a photo on the right showing our goal, a repaired 1798 building in use. And then down below, a second project in Canaan, that's the freight shed built in 1923, 1924, where we have a Moose Plate grant to repair the slate roof on that shed, and that is a town-owned building. The meeting house we own.
Great, thank you. And Kate Marquis, next slide, please.
Hi, I'm Kate. I live in Manchester. So I'm part of the Save the Chandler House kind of campaign or committee, which was the Preservation Alliance's 2015, way back in 2015, 7 to Save. It was included in that list. It doesn't look super sexy on the outside, but it really is on the inside. And our committee kind of quietly worked since 2015 to kind of play matchmaker with the owners of this building, which was the Diocese of Manchester, to avoid demolition because they definitely publicly wanted to demolish and put a parking lot in there in its place for the parish, which you can see right next door in that picture. So our kind of activism portion of what we were doing really kicked in at the beginning of this year when talks broke down from our matchmaking process. Talks broke down and the diocese applied for a demolition permit to demolish the building. And I'm happy to say that just today, I think this might be the first public announcement we've had. The sale went through last night. The official sale went through last night, and they're recording it today. So we'll make an announcement. Keep an eye on our Facebook page. Thanks.
And the sale is to
the Courier Museum of Art, which is, you can kind of see on the left-hand side behind the building in this picture. That is how close the Courier Museum is to this building. So this will extend their campus.
terrific. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Both of you have done such great work, and we really appreciate your coming today to share some of your experiences. Next slide. So we've got 10 tips, and I'm going to go through each of these about 5 minutes each. Team, that's the most important thing to start with. Build a leadership team with people who are really committed to the project, and make sure you have a range of expertise. In this case, maybe it's a historian, maybe it's someone who has legal experience, someone who has fundraising experience, someone who has building project management experience, and maybe somebody who knows how to do communications. So I'm just going to ask Kate to talk a little bit about her team, and then Judith about how they put together their team.
Okay, great. So our team came together really organically. There was an initial punch of information from the diocese about this. A real estate person said, take this house for $35,000. And it hit all the newspapers and all this. So it generated a little bit of information. So there was a small group of people who got together that had concerns about not wanting this to get torn down. We were lucky enough to have some prominent preservationists on that committee who were also board members of other places in the city, which was important. We were lucky to have developers who were interested, which I don't think I would have said that at the beginning of this process. I would have been like, developers. But they've been key and integral to this. They had, we've had, me. I'm just a person off the street, to be honest, who was really upset that the Hill-Lassonde house was torn down in my city. And this house was down the street from me, and I was sick of it. But I had very little to no preservation experience when I started this.
But lots of other experience.
I have other experiences. Professionally, I'm in marketing. I'm in video marketing. So for me, video marketing, I think about meeting the client's needs all the time. And in this case, the diocese was our client. So we had that. We also had parishioners who were stakeholders in this. And we actively recruited those people. We had neighbors. We tried to get everyone who could possibly be touched by this, plus keeping in touch with the Heritage Commission, keeping in touch with the aldermen from that particular area. There was a lot of discussion and communication between all these people, and understanding the relationships. So I think understanding the relationships and building people who, a team of people who are on board with discussing and sharing the vision with their relationships was important.
Great, thank you.
Mhm.
Judith, how about your team? Your Mascoma Valley Preservation organization is quite young.
Yes, it is. We're 2 years old. And it was the brainchild of somebody you know very well, Andrew Cushing, who worked with the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance. And some of you others may know him because he zoomed all over the state doing his work for the Alliance. And he actually began to draw us together just from past knowledge of us as individuals. We're certainly a multi-generational group. I think it's quite a young group, but there are some of us older folks who have different kinds of experience, either in community action, whether it's with preservation or other activities, and definitely unbounded enthusiasm, I would say. There are some good grant writers, and certainly Andrew has a lot of preservation practice experience. One thing that we've been happy with, because of the complexity of some of our projects, or especially one of our projects, we have a wonderful lawyer who's taken us on as pro bono. And so if some of your projects get naughty legally, that's been a wonderful thing, a wonderful help. So we're actually just going through a SWOT team analysis, and that's going to be very helpful for us too. Because
Strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats.
that's right.
Did you have a facilitator come in and help, a facilitator?
No, we should perhaps, but right now we're at the stage of collecting the information. And then one of us has offered to coalesce that and get it back to us for voting. It's just beginning.
Great, okay, thank you. Anyone want to add anything to this team topic? We have about a minute. Okay, next slide then. Developing a plan is probably the best thing you can do at the outset. Even if you don't have your full team together, you can start your planning process. And these are the building blocks on which a successful project has to rest. Getting a building assessment in the upper right photo, that's an assessment of Chase's Mill in Alstead. Develop a realistic budget for the project, including estimating your sources of income. The building assessment will tell you what the project is probably going to cost, but then how are you going to pay for it? And in some communities, there tends to be plenty of money, and in other communities, not so much. So that makes it more difficult and probably extends the timeline for a project. You need a project schedule, though, that's realistic when you expect to achieve your goals. What's most important in all of this planning is to be really sure that there are benefits to a lot of people in the community. And you have to articulate those in a compelling way, because you're up against, if it's town funds, for instance, a new fire truck or repaving the roads.
Yeah.
And saving a building or reusing a building is not as easy to understand sometimes as those simpler projects. And then once you have your plan, you have to put it together in a format that can be easily shared and that will be persuasive. So that's both print and online materials to make your case, including visuals that show what it's going to look like and how it might be used. In the slide that introduced Judith, we had that picture of the building all fixed up. And I think that kind of planning and looking forward is really essential. Now, I know Kate's project wasn't a town building. You didn't even own the building. But tell us a little bit about how your group planned, because you said you were very informal.
We were very informal, yeah. But I think the first thing was we had to plan in stages, because really the first stage was just getting into some kind of discussion or talks with the property owner, which was the Diocese of Manchester, who really didn't want to talk about it. So that was our first hurdle, was let's plan how to just start a dialogue. And really, I mean, that was part of Maggie and I first met with the Preservation Alliance, just to say, what are some strategies? And a lot of that went into having discussions with people who knew the stakeholder that we couldn't talk to. So talking to other people who have worked with the diocese, talking to people who have experience in just starting these dialogues was the first part. Once we got that done and we found out what the needs were of that person or of that organization, then we could come up with a plan of like, what are we going to do? So stage 2 really became, our role became matchmaker as a committee to find the right person to buy the building if the diocese was even willing to sell. So that kind of became our new, our second stage. And then our third stage became activism, like heavy activism, getting the community to apply a little bit of pressure so that people could get back into talks. So we adjusted, and I think we'll talk about that later, but that plan became really important. And during the activism stage, and I think I want to talk a little bit about, I think it was Ernie who said that he was really thinking about upping the idea of preservation. Part of this was how we talked about this, in having a clear vision for not only the city, well, a clear vision for the Chandler fitting into our vision of the city and being something that everybody wanted to be on board with, and being able to talk about that a little bit of our history and why it's important to save this building. And my personal thing is a sense of place and being able to articulate how the building helps us have a sense of place and builds our community. And when we can do that, like, people want to get on board with those kind of positive things that are also completely non-political, that everybody can enjoy together. And I think when we try to keep it very positive in that direction.
That's a great segue to Judith. I'm sorry to cut you off, but thank you.
Certainly the Grafton Center Meeting House, which had a disastrous fire in 2016, after that burned, there was a building assessment done. It was not a building assessment, it was an engineer's assessment of danger. At that time, the site was owned by a private group of people that had an argumentative relationship with the town of Grafton. We wanted to own the building because we felt that it could be repaired and that we wanted to make it usable again, not just for Grafton. It's right next to the rail trail. It gets a lot of traffic because it's right on Route 4. We felt that it could be a jewel again. It's an iconic old building, and we know that once it is repaired and in use again, it will reflect good things for Grafton, which is a small and rural and rather poor community, but it will also help this whole area of New Hampshire.
Great. I'm going to stop you there because I think we need to keep moving, but we'll
Sure.
come back, I hope. Next slide. Listening. Once you get your plans in place, you need to start sharing them and listening to feedback, and then using that feedback to refine your project and show that you're listening to community concerns and that you're making the tent as big as you can. So you want to include a lot of people at this stage and benefit from their opinions and ideas, even if they're different from what you're thinking. It may be valuable to take into account that and see if the project can be shaped in a way that will make it exciting for more people. Judith, you should talk about that first, I think.
Yeah, actually, I'm going to skip to ancient history in Canaan when we worked on a transportation enhancement project. We certainly went through the planning stage with Plan NH with a charrette. We did a lot of advertising for that. We took photographs of the way things looked and how it might look with drawing, how it might look after we completed the plan. And another project, we actually took plans around to many groups in town to get feedback and to get their ideas. And then when we got all those back together, the professional included some of those ideas. So a lot of people in town, in Canaan, were involved. With the Grafton Center Meeting House, because of the discordant nature of between the town and the previous owner, and because it involved tax liens and unpaid taxes, there was a lot of negative feedback when we began working on the Grafton Center Meeting House. But we actually found ourselves paying attention to that feedback and answering directly if there was a concern or question about it to those people. It's not a town-owned building, but because it involved taxes, we needed certainly to do that. We couldn't ignore taxpayers who were concerned about not getting their tax dollars back from the previous owner. I hope that helps.
Yep, that's great. Okay. This is one of those Plan New Hampshire charrettes in the photograph, actually. For those of you who don't know about Plan New Hampshire charrettes, they are a service of an organization called Plan New Hampshire. They bring experts to your community to help with some community planning issue. They typically don't work on a single building, but they might work on a group of buildings. And this, I believe, was one in Colebrook. The vision is created by the experts who come in, and then it's shared with the community and after a community listening session. So it incorporates ideas from the town and then refines them into something that can be presented as a template for the town to work from. So for those of you who aren't familiar with Plan New Hampshire, that's a great resource. Judith, did you want to add something?
Yeah, one applies for a charrette. You do need to make an application through your planning board, I believe, unless that's changed.
Yep. Okay, great. Next slide. So then you really want to try to build support, and the political kind of support is often the best if it's a town-owned building or if it's an issue like taxes that impacts the entire town. This photograph is of a group of Girl Scouts dressed in matching t-shirts that feature their project, which was to try to advocate for reuse of a vacant municipal electric building as a community center. And they made a cardboard model of the building and did a lot of research and then presented to the selectmen. You can imagine how this was in Wolfboro, and it was a 7 to Save project. You can just imagine how persuasive that was for the taxpayers and the selectmen to have these Girl Scouts stand up there and take turns describing what they hoped to accomplish. But it's important to share the credit sometimes with selectmen. You can tell them what they need to know about the project and give them a chance to take some ownership. It's important to start early and talk to the influencers in the community, listen to them, adjust the project. So, and also look at the costs. In this case, how much for a feasibility study? It wasn't a question of jumping right in and saying, let's reuse this building for something, but let's take that first step. It's let's get that building assessment. Let's look at potential costs for this kind of use. Let's put that use out there and see what other groups might get on board with that, so that eventually you build a really big, broad coalition to help the project succeed. Judith?
Well, in the case of the meeting house, once we started working on it, we were surprised and delighted that so many people cared about it. People not just in Grafton, but in this region. And when we started to have some volunteer work days, people from neighboring towns came to help. We were also surprised that financial support came. We weren't depending on Grafton, but it came from all over. In fact, it came from overseas in New York City. So
Wow.
yeah.
I think we've gotten on the wrong slide.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, there we
Yep.
go.
Yep.
Good.
And so
Thanks.
having people even be able to work on the garden space at the meeting house that day, that was great.
Yeah, that gives people a sense of buy-in, doesn't it?
Yep.
Just to
Yeah.
say, come help clean it out, or
Yeah.
come help work in the gardens.
Yeah.
Great. Kate, how about you?
I'll just share quickly. I mean, we included select people in our discussions because this was such a long process and there were a lot of scenarios about where we could go with it. We would talk in the background with selectmen and some people on the planning and heritage commissions and all the different groups, and just include them in the discussion. If we do this, are we going to be able to divide the lot? Are we going to be able to do this? Are we going to do that? So they always felt like they were a part of the discussion, so that when it came time to actually implement, it was kind of like we already had a buy-in. And I think that was really important. On top of that, I think it's always good to make things for people to do. And I know that sounds a little strange, but making sure that you have a lot of different ways that people can participate, because whether it's writing a postcard, sharing a Facebook post, coming out on the street, making a sign. Some people just want to make a sign, great. But every time you put a lawn sign on their lawn, anytime you can get that buy-in, as soon as they participate, even in a very small way, they're on board. And then when you need them, or at least for my experiences, when you need them, you can call on them to help if you make it easy and accessible for them. So when it came time to actually do things like zoning board and planning board, we knew all the neighbors already. So we called them personally and said, can you please write a letter? Here's all the information. Here's some key talking points. You just need to do it. So that the planning boards and zoning commission, they were flooded and overwhelmed with support when that time came, which made the decisions very easy.
That is terrific. Great. Okay, next slide. Okay, this is about sharing your project. Involve the public early and often. The last slide was about building political support, but there's definitely overlap. Invite people to visit the project if it's possible to do so. Use different communication channels to promote the project. Kate just mentioned a couple about Facebook posts. Stress the community benefits, part of your case study that you did during your planning phase. And quickly address any misinformation. And I think that's really important too. Many projects do have a Facebook presence. They write press releases, but there are so many other ways of getting people involved and getting buy-in. So I'd love to have a little bit of sharing of fun ideas on that. Judith, do you want to start? Or Kate?
Kate,
Well,
go
I
ahead.
was going to say so much of what I just said also applies to this in a lot of ways. And also just, we always let the public, for the most part, if there was something that we could publicly share, we did. And it's really important to have, for us to have regular communication with our public on our Facebook page and whatnot. We also had like a member who just was, they're pretty good at Instagram and Twitter. So they took care of all of our Instagram and Twitter feeds. Great. That's something I don't have to think about. And it helps them be very connected. So using like whatever your talent is of your committee, using their talents in whatever way you can, I think is one of the biggest parts.
So I'm going to ask you about the sign behind you.
Yes, that side. Yes. So when we needed to apply pressure, so our main activism came when we needed to apply a lot of pressure to make a deal happen. So we made sure that we connected a lot of things all at the same time. So lawn signs was one. And those lawn signs, there's only one decision maker who could make this really happen, and that was the bishop. And we didn't know how much he knew. So we put those lawn signs, we didn't have a lot of money, strategically on his way to and from the office.
Great.
And we had our members out there, we asked specifically for members who lived along this route to contact us if we could put a lawn sign on their lawn.
And it has his name on it.
It does. And that wasn't comfortable for everyone. Some people cut the top off because they weren't comfortable with that. And that's okay. That's okay. We still have, he was the key decision maker. He made this whole thing happen. So that kind of thing, we had a postcard campaign. We just found a million ways for people to participate and kind of flood everything. Was that what
you printed up the postcard and people could pick it up and address it and add their message? Is that how that
I had
works?
this here. So that was the postcard, simple. On the back, they were pre-stamped and pre-addressed. So that, and then we gave them an example of how they might fill it out with some talking points. And then we gave them out to people at the protests. We had postcard pickup points at different parks in the neighborhood where people could come and pick them up, which also led us to have just dialogues with people in the neighborhood about what are you doing here? It's being really open and honest and sharing that vision with as many people as possible in as many ways, depending on who you have as the talents that you're working with.
Thank you. Judith.
Well, one of the first things we did was put up a handmade sign that said, save this historic resource. And then of course we put up our 7 to Save sign for the Grafton Center Meeting House. Yeah, we also used postcards when in the Grafton Center Meeting House case, there was a warrant article to see whether we could reduce some of the back taxes. So postcards were mailed to folks we thought would be supportive. And, in Grafton, there's a Grafton Facebook page, and that's supposed to be positive. I'm not a Grafton resident, and nor do I do Facebook, but there was, that's a place where the negative comments would come up. And so we really had to steel ourselves to respond to those comments either personally and not get into an argument on Facebook. The other thing is our Facebook posts for Mascoma Valley Preservation sometimes get picked up by other Facebook entities like Town of Canaan's newsletter. And so a good example is when we worked to clear the shrubbery and trees growing into the little freight shed. We got permission to clear the shrubbery, and photographs of that and thanks to the town for cleaning up after we cut the trees down, did get put on the not the Facebook, the town's newsletter that goes out often. So I'm not sure that that answers share, but we certainly have tried our best to share the positive aspects of what
That's
we're doing.
great.
Can I
Um,
quickly share one more thing?
Yeah,
Make friends with your local news sources.
Yeah.
Make friends with them now. Keep them in the loop. Let them know what the information that they can and can't publish, and call on them when you need them once you have that relationship.
yeah, that's great. That's great. Just on this slide is a button for the Friends of Kensington Town Hall. Just that little button when you're in the post office or the grocery store and people will ask you and you'll have a chance to tell them about the project can be really effective. Don't need to be high tech all the time. Next slide. There we go. So this is about asking the experts for guidance. And a shameless plug for the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance, but also the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources can provide assistance for your project. And both of these are available at no charge. This is a project in Alstead, and you see at the table Peter Michaud and Laura Black from the Division of Historical Resources, and I was there representing the Preservation Alliance, and we were in the very early planning stages, just laying out the tools and the strategies and what it would take to be successful with raising grant funds as well as getting the buy-in from the community. A little known tip is that it's so helpful to have these organizations know you and know about your project and get excited about it too. This is a small world, and if we haven't ever met with you and a 7 to Save nomination comes in, then we have to do all that homework to get up to speed. If we've already met you and already seen your project, that's so helpful in then being a strong advocate for it if it's a great project and if you've already touched all these people in your planning process. The other thing that can be really helpful is local mentors. Judith mentioned an attorney who gave assistance pro bono, but maybe there is somebody who chaired the Heritage Commission for 40 years and doesn't want to be directly involved anymore, but could really help and give you advice about what it took to save a building that might be similar to yours. The Preservation Alliance also sometimes matches people with mentors. I think, just having that kind of voice of experience and knowing town politics, because often a group might not be that familiar with how political things work in the community, that can be really helpful too. So as Kate said, just talk to a ton of people and start building the relationships early so that then when you really need their help, you can call on them quite readily and they'll be there for you.
Can I just add, and it's not just the experts on preservation, it's the experts on community. It's the experts on, I didn't know anything about the diocese. I couldn't even say it when we first started this. So it was about talking to some Catholics that I knew, getting that information, understanding how things work, talking to other community, and I have to say, the mentorship was awesome. I had somebody that we had some very long-term preservation experts who treated me stumbling in as a newcomer with equally and fostered my activity in this process. So that was very helpful too.
Great, thank you. Judith?
Well,
No.
some of us certainly have looked at the videos that the New Hampshire Preservation Alliance has on your site. I turn to those. So that's, even if these two projects may not have worked directly with either of these groups, we've certainly made use of information on their websites as well as your video.
Terrific. That's terrific. Thank you. Okay, and the National Trust for Historic Preservation is another group who has a lot of information on their website and might be helpful. Next slide. When the going gets tough, remember your goals and the reasons why you're doing this for the betterment of the community and to protect important cultural and historic resources. The slide on the right is the interior of the Chandler House. And even though with this project and Kate's work, the public were never allowed into that building in the most recent push that they had, just seeing those photographs of the incredible woodwork and wallpaper and the grandness of the first floor rooms was enough to convince people that this was a really important home in the city of Manchester, built right next to Moody Courier's home, which is the site where the Courier now stands, and other leading lights of the development of the mills in Manchester. So that can be very convincing and very powerful on sort of an inspirational level. And then the slide on the left is the Mill Pond Dam. It's a rare early 20th century dam. The town has gone back and forth about repairing it versus removing it. And now there's a final push and a hearing next week. But advocates have put lights under the falls of the dam and even put a sign on the dam that says this place matters, and that's lit at night so that just out of the picture is Route 108 crossing the Oyster River, so people can look off to the side and see this beautiful dam, see people skating on the mill pond or fishing in the summer, and just understand that this is a really important historic resource for the community. And I think that can be quite compelling. Comments?
I'll throw in that it comes back to that vision thing, being able to articulate that vision of what you have for whatever you're doing. But also it's about the house. Like for us on our committee, we had to keep reminding ourselves this is about the house, because it's really easy to get caught up when you're working with all these different people, places, and things. It's really easy to get distracted from that goal of it's about the house. And I can remember another committee member going, well, because you get to the point, there's just so many pieces moving, and you know, it's easy to want to jump on board with this because it looks so positive, but it's about the house. Keep focusing on the house. Like even when, you know, no deals were done before this winter. So the poor house, we didn't want it to be empty for a winter. How are we going to ready this as a committee? Even though we were pretty sure the Courier was going to deal with that, but that wasn't necessarily true. So we had to think about the future of the house. So not getting distracted by all the other stuff, but on that key focus.
Yep. And I think, Judith, you've said in your community, this could be such an important building.
Well, certainly the Grafton Center Meeting House, I think will be for this region, and even the little freight shed will be. There's a lot of interest in its repair because the town went through something awful when the little town burned down. And this was probably one of the first buildings built because they had to get timber and building materials right up to Canaan after the fire. And I just want to say that when the going gets tough, we can get discouraged. And, you know, it's important to surround yourself with people who are supportive and have fun, take breaks, have some time to laugh at the trolls, as one of my younger board members says. So, I mean, we're privately, of course, but you have to have some time to laugh.
And have fun and celebrate.
Have fun. Yeah.
Yeah. So maybe, you know, you do have a big celebration when you get the tarp on the roof. It's not the end of the project, but there are all these milestones along the way.
Yeah.
Or
We have a bell to ring at the meeting house.
yeah, perfect. Okay, next slide, please. Be respectful of those with opposing ideas. Strive to be fair and reasonable, and understand, of course, that not everyone sees the world the same way you do. Be positive. Address arguments against your project with facts that support your position instead of making negative attacks on other people. This slide is of a huge public hearing for Northern Pass, and you can see the orange shirts sprinkled throughout the audience. That was a very polarizing debate about bringing this power line down through northern New Hampshire. But on both sides, there was a great deal of civility and respect for the other person's position. And I think we do need to remember that. Somebody mentioned responding to trolls on Facebook, and I think, you know, it takes great discipline, but just not to engage with those negative comments and keep your messages positive is really, really important.
And not to take the comments personally, and not to get involved, not to let that happen.
Yeah.
Because we get a lot of no's, and you just have to put your own feeling of negativity in a box.
And I think there is over time a process of people gravitating to projects that display success and integrity. And while they might have said no in the beginning, once they see that you are making progress and that other people are on board, they may change their minds and say, you know what, we were wrong. This is great. We're going to support it.
Yeah. And I'll just gonna jump in. Language is so important in this, with this, because how we frame things is how people perceive them. And it was very important, like we always talked about from the very beginning. So maybe this is part of strategy, but we always kept in mind our goal is for everybody to win. So, and in that way, we really have to be respectful of all the players in there when you want everyone to win. And when we moved into what I would probably call a more active, aggressive activism stage, we were very aggressive this year with our activism. We still tried to do it very respectfully. So everything was positive. And like even when we were activists on the street, like we decided to go with no screaming, no shouting, but with bells. Because it was a church, it's church. So just being mindful of thinking about how would this be perceived by the people on the other side of who are receiving this. And also it goes in with the listening, making sure you're listening to people who disagree with you, so that when you're doing that, you can automatically address their concerns as well. And again, language is a big part of that, how you frame things with your words. And that goes back to the goal. What's the goal? Save the Chandler House. You know,
Okay.
that's it.
Great. Next one. Next slide. Adjust. Things can change. Things do change. If an idea doesn't fly this year, maybe details need to be adjusted. Sometimes a project takes a long time. It will succeed after there are changes in the economic or political climate, or in town or project leadership. Sometimes you really have to wait for that cranky selectman to get off the select board. Sometimes it takes a change in project leadership if someone has not been building the coalition that they need to build and the project just runs out of steam, but then time elapses and a new group of people come together. Maybe they have a new vision and it's resurrected. And maybe we're not in a recession anymore and people are feeling a little generous about supporting a project. So you never know what factors are going to be there. As a field service person, I used to say to people, plan on about 10 years to accomplish your project. And they laugh and they say, you're kidding. And I say, no, it can really take that long. So you have to adjust along the way. I would be interested to hear Judith's comments and Kate's comments on this one. And this, by the way, this photo is of the Ioka Theater in Exeter, which was a 7 to Save, I think in 2009. And there were plans for a community theater in that space. A lot of people donated money. They didn't quite get to their goal. They didn't quite have the critical mass to be able to purchase the building. And the project died. It was sold. The new owner sat on it for quite a few years. And now finally, redevelopment plans are underway to turn it into condos and first floor retail space. So it does take patience and time and adjustments.
And also I'd say that, you know, if you don't succeed at one town meeting, folks expect that you're going to be back. I mean, you know, it's expected that you'll come back perhaps with another way of another approach.
Yep, a more incremental funding request.
Yes.
I've heard it often said that by selectmen that they don't really care about the details of the project, but they have a number in their mind of what they would feel comfortable putting on the warrant for a request for that building. And they don't need to know the details. In Wolfboro, when we were doing the town hall rehab, it was 3 million. Well, the project was 4 million. So the Friends of Town Hall said, okay, we'll raise the delta 1 million privately. And that's what the warrant article said, that 3 million would only be encumbered if the other million was raised and the project worked. But it took 2 other tries before that finally passed at town meeting. It started off at 7 million.
I'll share that we've gone, this has been 6 years now for us with this project, and we're just getting to the part where we're actually doing the work of it being sold so that we can do the work. But what was really important is that in 2017, 2018, we thought we had kind of finished our matchmaking, and we thought that we were kind of done. We had kind of disbanded as a committee, to be honest. And then at the beginning of this year, things changed when the demo permit went in, and all of a sudden we became an activist group as opposed to this kind of matchmaking group. So we had to adjust and form. The good thing is that we kept that goal in mind, right? So that it's never been about us as a committee. It's always about that goal. So the people that are on this committee now are completely different than the people that started, with very few exceptions. But peripheral people have been involved. So it's like everybody's still kind of there, but like a few people moved out of the area. This happens, that happens, things change. So changing along with them and changing strategy. We had an alderman that was really on board with us, got voted out, but he got voted back in. So, you know, it's all kind of funny how it works. Hang in there.
Great. Next slide, please. Okay, persist. This is related to the last one. Have lots of patience and tolerance for challenges. Persistence and perseverance are really critical. Things don't happen overnight. They can take 10 years or more. The political process can be filled with twists and turns. Have faith, and I guess have fun too. What do you all want to say about this one? I think we've covered it pretty well, and I'd love to open the group to questions and comments while we still have 5 minutes left. Okay, anybody have questions or comments? Let's do the next slide, which summarizes everything. And let's hear what all of you listeners have to say. Please.
I will just say there's nothing like standing out in cold weather with signs at town meeting. I mean, there's nothing like it. Build community.
There's nothing like having to prepare a speech at town meeting and walking up to that microphone and you're quite sure your knees are going to go out from under you.
Yes, and there might be grumbling at the back of the room.
One of the strategies that I remember from 2006 when I was working with the Epsom Meeting House was preparing for town meeting with that group of advocates, and they were doing a handout for town meeting. And we sat down and made a list of all the things that the naysayers were arguing. And then in a separate column, we listed the positive corollary to the project. And that became the handout. It was incredibly effective. And people did vote to not demolish that building and to put some effort into moving the church onto town land. It has not been reused as was originally envisioned, but at least the building was saved. And the hope is that at some point, there will be a new group of people who will come together to try to find a new use for that building. So some wins, but it does take time.
And sometimes a different organization might carry through, I think perhaps you said this, what the first group could not quite complete.
Exactly, and buildings can be leased to another group who will then, make the investment and come up with a use, particularly a municipal building. And that can be a really productive solution too. So if no one has anything else to add to this, I'm just
Oh.
gonna say, yeah.
Well, Maggie, this is Kathy. Also making really good connections with the budget committee, I think is something, when we were saying build that political support, make sure definitely that includes, your budget committee, because they're really the ones with the ultimate power as far as the warrant goes. And all of these things are true, and it does take. I'm sitting here and one of our presenters here, they all did an excellent job. Thank you. Saying, oh, way back in 2015, and I'm sitting here and I'm going, well, we were a 7 to Save project in 2012, but we will get it done. It's it is a long, hard process when you're asking people for money, which is basically what it all comes down to, is that you're asking people for money. So, but I appreciate this. This has been helpful. Thank you.
Well, thank you for making that really important point, Kathy. The budget committee does hold a tremendous amount of power in towns. Yeah. Yeah. Anyone else? Okay, well, I want to thank Kate and Judith for sharing their experiences. That was terrific. And to all of you who signed on and took part in the session, we'll send you some follow-up links as well as an evaluation to help us plan other programs and help keep the Alliance healthy by renewing your membership or making a donation. 80% of our funding comes from individual donations, and our work is more important than ever in strengthening community connections and fueling our economic recovery. Our next session is a program that the New Hampshire Division of Historical Resources is presenting on Section 106, which is the federal review process for projects that are impacted by any federal undertaking, whether it's funding or permitting or construction. And that's February 24th at noontime. You can sign up for that session on our events page on our website. So thank you very much again. Thank you, Judith and Kate. You both are inspiring. And to everyone else, stay well and keep at it. Call the Alliance if you want some individual coaching. We're here to help. Thanks.
Thank you, Maggie.
Okay.
Thank you,
Bye-bye.
Maggie.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.